My name is Mwalimu Musheshe, Ashoka Fellow. I have a PhD in global environmental leadership. I'm the first Ashoka Fellow in East Africa, 2001. Ashoka is an international organization that recognizes individuals that are social entrepreneurs, which means we are not doing enterprises with the profit motive, but we invest for the public. So they found me worthy. The organization is in Washington, and I was elected through the region as the first Ashoka Fellow for that recognition of my work as a social entrepreneur. The story is a long one. I used to work with an organization called Uganda Food and Peace Project as a volunteer. But after 8 months, we discovered that there was rampant corruption. And we raised the red flag. My colleagues who eventually founded the URDT, Mr. Ephraim Rutaboba and Constantine, and then of course African Food and Peace Foundation. So when we found that corruption in the organization, having been, I think, the most vocal and the leader in the whistleblowing, they arranged to kill me and they hit me with a hand grenade. And when they hit me with a hand grenade, the government moved in and dissolved the organization I was working in Kahunge. But then we sat down and said, why should Uganda lose because of individuals who have greed? That's why we asked the African Food and Peace Foundation that was supporting the then Uganda Food and Peace Project, that they allow us to continue with the principles with which we are running the organization. And because they trusted us, they agreed to support us, but with a new organization we called the Uganda Rural Development and Training Program. And also to ensure that there is harmony and not conflict, we had to relocate from Kahunge in Kamwenge to this place in Kagadi. And by then, of course, Kagadi was a hard place to reach. We had just gotten out of the war. It was a part of a rural triangle. Communication was very difficult, roads were very bad, and for us that was exciting because we are going deep into the rural area to test our methodology. So that's how URDT was born in 1987. There have been, I think, significant changes. If I look back and see how we found, by the way, there was no Kagadi then. Kagadi was a sub-district when we started here. It was part of Hoima district. Then from Hoima district, they carved out what was then known as Kibale. And Kibale had 3 districts. There was not even districts. Kibale became a district, but the most known then were the counties of Buyaga, Buyanja, and Bugangais. Actually, Kagadi became a district recently in 1992. Then we actually carved out, 1992? No, 2000. 2017. Yeah, 2017. And that's when we had the new arrangement of creating Kagadi district. Then Kibale remained with its name, which is in the center, then Kakumiro district. So our impact was originally not just in Kagadi, it was in Hoima district. And in Hoima district, we worked closely with the UNICEF in especially water protection, springs and wells. We made more than 200 wells in the area. We worked with Oxfam in 1994 when the government changed the policy about the forests, especially the one in Kabarole, and the people were displaced from Mumpokia forest, which is part of Kibale forest, and they were brought into Kibale. And when they were brought to Kibale, they asked URDT to organize a training and organizing so that they can settle. So in a few years, we moved the displaced people. There were more than 200 families who were settled in Narweyo, they were settled in Nkoko, they were settled in Kisita and Kakindo, and we came up with a program of assimilating the newcomers from Mumpokia into the local fabric, and we organized a program what we call an integrated rural development program, in which we introduced to them the principles of creating, the principles of organizing, sustainable agriculture, water, education. So as we are talking now, Kakumiro, and especially Kisita, Katikara, Mwitanzige, and Nkoko are now a bread basket of this area. If you went there, they have established not just posts in terms of towns, they have now town councils, which actually some of them as big as Kagadi. And yet when we went there in the early 90s, there were villages and small posts. So we have an impact in Kakumiro for changing the landscape in terms of farming, in terms of education, in terms of water and health. Then we also have a very big impact in this area of Kibale and Kagadi through our education, because we established schools. We have a school in Kakumiro. We had schools here which we have transferred, and these schools are unique in a way that we get children, one girl from a family, we bring them on campus, we bring them and their parents, and we have parameters of knowing what poverty is, what are the indicators. We train them, we call it the two-generation approach, where we teach the children and we teach their parents or their guardians to do transformation activities. And I can tell you more than 1,000 students and homes have transformed from abject poverty to what we call modern, thriving homesteads and families. Then of course we got engaged in introducing. By then when we came, the agriculture was very low. The education and what we would call dropout rate of the girls were more than it was about 44%, and the boys dropout was 32%. There was only one secondary school, Naigana, and nothing else. All the primary schools were grass thatched and developed. There was, I think, also a secondary school in Muhoro, and that's all. Then we gave impetus to education, and people started taking real education very seriously. As we are talking now, Kagada alone has about 6 secondary schools. Even they have nursery schools, they have well-organized primary schools. Then even in the hinterlands, in the villages, then we started seeing a very big movement of parents taking their children to school, because we set an example of what it is to have a girl child in school and transform the households. So that is an impact. Then in terms of incomes, the incomes were very low among the farmers. We introduced what we call nutritional-based agriculture. Nutritional-based agriculture means whereas they were cultivating maize as a crop, they didn't have vegetables. So we introduced, you can't believe it in this area, we introduced tomatoes, we introduced cabbages, we introduced onions. And I remember a very interesting story when we introduced watermelon. And people went and cooked them. And they couldn't get ready, they thought they were pumpkins. So we have come a long way. But now if you go everywhere, they are eating watermelons, they are eating vegetables. I remember even one time we had a workshop of women from Rutete settlement here. And at lunch break, by then there was no much bottled water. So the only drinks were sodas. The women refused them and said, what are these things? So with them they are used to bushera and other things, and now you're introducing this colored stuff. But now if you go in every function, people are fighting for soda. So in fact, there are certain things, not in terms of just even wealth, but in terms of attitude, in terms of mindset, in terms of consciousness, we see a lot of change. I remember when we came, you could go to church, because we used to talk from churches. You look at how people are dressed. Children are barefooted, the women and men are barefooted. And of course there was no tarmac, so when it rained and people are crossing the swamps, they would carry their shoes in their hands, etc., etc. But now if you go to church and you see how people are dressed, the children, the elderly, people are in suits, people are in usuti. There are certain things you can't measure, but actually they are doing what? They are happening. But I think most important is because of our principle of transcendence, people raising beyond sectarianism, tribal, religious. We managed to pacify this place. There used to be tension among the locals who are called indigenous Banyoro and the Bafuruki. So we went through processes of negotiations, processes of pacification. Now the issue of making the democratic process of choosing leaders is no longer as contentious as it was. Actually, I remember even it took the whole president to intervene in the Bunyoro issues, the conflict between the indigenous, and I was among the people who were the delegation to pacify this area. So when we look at the area of peace, actually we used even we are going to have another one this year. Every year we used to organize what we call peace runs every 21st September. And that raised a lot of consciousness. We got involved in areas of HIV consciousness. Now we are busy. We have, I think, worked and treated and screened about 27,000 women in the area for cervical cancer. So in areas of education, we have educated thousands of families and children. Then of course we introduced the institute where we are teaching vocational and youth leadership, because many VTIs and through vet they train technical skills, but with us we combine technical skills. We included entrepreneurship, we included leadership development, we included consciousness raising, and now as we are talking, we are in 20 districts. It's a full block from Mitiana to Bundibugyo. All those districts in between are covered, and from Kiriandongo to Kasese, all those districts we are working in. And every district except the three, Kakumiro, Kagadi, and Kibale, the rest have an epicenter manager who is a graduate of URD of African Rural University, organizing the young people and the artisans in those districts. Why have I said except for Kagadi, Kakumiro and Kibale, because in these districts, which are original areas of our operation, our epicenter managers or our graduates are in every sub-county. So we have more than 90 graduates covering local communities and working with the artisans, working with farmers. Now, if I address myself to the 20 districts, we decided, and I will explain what we call the satellite model. In the satellite model, we said we have an institute here, we have programs, we have training, it is centralized. Let us identify other people in the communities who have the same skills, same interests and whatever, so that they can train the youth locally from their villages. As we are talking now, with the support of MasterCard Foundation, we have trained 57 young people, 70% of whom are women, and I think about 34,000 have transitioned. They are doing business and working. And we are working also in 4 refugee settlements. And to do this work, we are working with 77 or 700, about 700 actually artisans. So now what is the idea? As we are talking about impact, many institutions are owned by private individuals in a centralized way, or they are owned by the government. These ones we are supporting to evolve and develop are supported in the communities by individual entrepreneurs and artisans. So you can imagine in an area of 20 districts to have about 700 vocational learning centers managed by the communities and supervised by the communities, and training all that big number, because now we are dealing with the issues of employability, the issues of socio-economic empowerment, and this has been one of the paths. Then, of course, we have a radio station. The listenership per day is more than 2 million listeners. And it's not only listening, but we have done surveys where people can give testimony. I would not be doing this business if it wasn't for KKCR. And luckily enough, for many years, until very recent, from 2000, Kagadi Community Radio, Kagadi Kibale Community Radio was the only community radio station. And how did it begin? I think you are going to be interested. It began with our participation in the Rio de Janeiro Summit in 1992, when we were discussing environmental issues. And then we sat there and observed the heads of states and the heads of government passing resolutions on climate, global warming, on desertification, on marine issues. Very nice. And we are aware as the Ugandans that many times the resolutions are done in conferences, and when they come back, the reports gather dust. So when we came back with our counterparts from Tanzania, among the Maasai, and our counterparts from Kenya, with the leadership of what we call Eco News Africa and Climate Africa, that's when we came up with community radio and community what we call media. And as we are talking, we have 3 radio stations, one among the Maasai in Terati, Semanjaro, and another one headed by women, 11 women groups in Ukambani, in Kibweni, and then Kagadi Kibale Community Radio. So that's how the radio came about, looking at the issues of advocacy, lobbying, leadership in environment. Actually, it is the same motivation which made us start Uganda Rural Development and Training Program. Because if you look at it, if you read our motto, is for human and rural development. we had seen over years in Karamoja, in Turkana, in Ethiopia, in Eritrea and other countries, every 10 years there would be a cycle of famine. And then the world would react, they would respond, they would take their aid. And once aid was in place, then people would become complacent until another famine breaks down. So those cycles say, no, we should do something that is consistent, making people be on the move. Every time they ask themselves, this we have accomplished, what next is missing? What should we put there in place? So then when we did that, when we came here actually, if you look at our constitution of 1987, objective N, we are saying we should start a university that addresses these issues, moving people from reacting to being proactive. And remember, when you were talking about a university in 1987, even the government hadn't thought of liberalizing higher education. So we are already ahead of our time. I think until 1991, that's when they liberalized and came up with the National Council for Higher Education. So we were about more than 5 years ahead of the government in terms of thought process about what development should be and how people can take charge of their own development. So now the question of African Rural University for Women, as I told you when we came here, one, we had to demonstrate the methodology, how it works, and actually in the communities, self-help, self-organization, self-reliance, where the clarion calls, it happened. But we could not start a university because, as I said, the dropout rate was very, very, very high. And the government had not put in place the law to allow us to do that. So when eventually the government opened space, the next thing is, what is that education for development that do we want to put in place? Then the next thing was, given the short space of time that we are running while others work, who are the best agent? Now, with us as a women's university, is not a response to affirmative action. No. We said, in life, who are the best teachers at the household level? Who are the best managers at the household level? Who are the best multitasked people at the household level? Who are the peacekeepers? Who are negotiators? And we found men, I'm one of them, we are more mechanistic in life. But women are resilient, they are patient, they resolve issues, they guide the children. And we said, if we can have women in control of the development process, we would get results faster. That's number one. Number two, we said, if women have been doing all this work and they get capacitated to do research, to do search, to get resources, they can actually transform households. How? Because we have seen in families where women are in charge, all the children go to school. Where men are in charge and the resources are very limited, only boys go to school. So therefore here we have a population of people who are balanced in looking at all the children deserving. Then the third one is we did an analysis of religions. And the missionaries were very, very wise. They started boys' schools and they started girls' schools. And the girls' schools were socialized in religious doctrine, not in order to get jobs, but essentially to be religious mothers who can be promoters of religion among the children. And if you make research, which we did, where the women are strong in their faith, the children follow the mother's face. So we are saying, therefore, if you have a mother who has understood rural transformation, who understood development, who has ingrained themselves in the values of change, they would be better agents even at the household level. So that's why the African Rural University for Women, they are the best change makers at their own life, at their own families, and they are the best change agents. I think we are one of the few universities that we talk about model and actually depict it graphically. It is drawn. If you have an opportunity to pass by the university in the lobby, you will find our African Rural University model. So what is in that model? In that model, we say Africa Rural University is a value-based all-women university. So if it is the value-based, where are the values? So our core in the center of our model is the inculcation and the practice of values. And these values could be in thousands, but we have chosen about 5 or 6 that are fundamental. And these values, we have placed them in the economic context. Because if you went to the bank, because they don't know you, if they have to lend you, they will ask for collateral because they don't trust you. But in our society, where our philosophy is Ubuntu, there is the trust. So trust is one of the galvanizing value in our work. Then it's one thing to be trusted, but where does trust come from the second party? You must be a person of integrity. You must be honest. You must be compassionate. You must have empathy. You must love. So all those are the ones which actually define how we design our training. Then we have also principles. Principle number 1, we are saying it's like commandment. Number 1, the people of Uganda, like people world over, are key to their own development. We refuse to be developed by others. They can just support us, but we should be the lead. Then the second one, we say when people have a common vision or a shared vision, they can raise above or transcend traditional prejudices like tribal, religious, political, gender, and work together for the actualization or realization of that which is very important to them. So the issue of transcendence, non-sectarianism, is one of them. The third one, we are saying, wait a minute, are we still reacting to events? Or we are going to be the masters of events? So we say, as people shift from being reactive to circumstances, they take charge of their own circumstances. They go in the orientation of creating their future. That's where sustainable development is. But the people themselves must be recognized that 1, they have the wisdom, they have the intelligence, they have the capacity, and the will to change. Lastly, we say all those things are good, but where is the role of education? So we say education, training, and information sharing. And this is where we put emphasis, is education, the normal education or different education. So besides the issue of women university, we are emphasizing transformative education. Transformative education means you don't do the usual learning. That's why in our university, we have the following attributes. 1, we have designed a curriculum with the communities. We bring the people together say, what should your young ladies learn? That's number one. I don't think there are many universities that do that. Then two, we said, by the way, Africa is in trouble. We are talking about developing these young people, developing the communities. In which context? And we said development should take place in the African context. So we are endeavoring to reduce copying and imitating the West. If you see everywhere, the dress, the eating, the language, the lifestyle is not African by and large. So how can we therefore put African context in education? And that's why we are working with what we call traditional wisdom specialists. Those are people who have the depository of knowledge, of culture and traditions, not the bad traditions. Of course, we want to stay away from them. But there are traditions that managed our soils. There are traditions that managed how we eat. There are traditions that managed how we relate to each other in terms of relationship, how we looked about the environment, how we looked after our animals, how we treated our diseases using what we call ethnomedicine. So we are going back to those basics. So therefore, even bringing professors without papers into the faculty as teachers was a leap into the future. So then three, when our graduates finish their course, no, before they finish, we have what we call 40% of our students should be doing a lot of practical work. It's not just theory. So we were the first, I think, among the few universities to come up with how can we have practical education in universities. And I remember the first time we tried with the National Council, they screamed at us. And they say, are you talking about university or you are talking about vocation? I said, no, I'm talking vocationalizing university. And now I'm happy the language has changed. You will hear everyone talking about our university graduates, our university students should be practical. We are the leader in that. So we make sure that our students are hands-on, they have theory, but theory immediately put it into practice. Another very important thing is our community engagement. If you attended our morning session, that's one of the community engagement. You see, many people think communities are out there. No, even the communities are localized. So here on the campus, we have a community of students, we have a community of staff, we have a community of workers. So every morning we meet for 1 hour and some minutes to engage on raising issues, emerging issues, discussing our history, discussing our politics, those things you will never find in books or in the education programs. Now, many universities, because of their size, first and foremost, it was not their culture, and therefore you cannot demand that they do it. Now here we have said, we take a few cadres, have very few disciples, give them enough time, coach, mentor, guide, so that then you have quality rather than quantity. So therefore, university is not about women per se, but it's also the package of interventions in learning, in research, in engagement, in development that we bring into the higher education. First and foremost, we are in an era of ICT. It's undeniable. And because of that, when you are teaching, you need connection to internet. When you are doing research, you need connection to internet. when you are learning, conversing, engaging, you need to have access of different sources of information. So therefore, our learning and the knowledge management base has been enhanced by the partnership with the RENU because of connectivity. And this is not only for the staff, for the students, and the partners who come here. So the conversations are continuing throughout because of the stream of energy, stream of network, stream of information, and I think that has been helpful. The second one is the engagement in meetings and workshops. Yeah, that's you see, there is one thing to install, like MTN gives us network, Airtel gives us network, then what? It's commercial, they make money. But here the RENU says, wait a minute, there is the human angle of you are giving them a service, and the service is evolving over time. What kind of capacity building should we be discussing? So that's why our administration, our ICT guys have benefited from engaging in workshops. Then there has been issues of interaction between not only calling us for the workshops, but also visiting with us. And it could be monitoring, it could be also engaging to update yourselves. How are you doing with the system we have provided? So the loosely, we can put it in terms of marketing, what you have, sales and client and customer service has been excellent for us. The first challenge is higher education for what? Higher education for what? If we can ask and answer that question, I think nationwide and in terms of the context of Africa, we would change how we invest in higher education. Many people ask me, and this is again the challenge we have of education, you have one program, you have very few students, so how do you finance? Because the money becomes very important. And I said, no, it's not about the money, it's about the quality of the graduate in terms of philosophical and ideological output. Now, what does that mean? It means if we are talking about government programs, we have currently the flagship PDM, and we are saying it is responsible in their language for eliminating poverty. How is the higher education helping the government and the communities to implement a flagship program of that nature? But if you went to universities, they are doing their programs as usual. So therefore, connecting the national interest, community interest has remained a challenge. And that's why you'll be amazed. Everyone is saying you design programs for job market, but that is industrial. That there are jobs out there are factories there are industries there, and then you train people who can fit in those industries. And then they still tell you that 80-something% are agrarian, they are in the villages. So where should be the work? The work should be in the communities. And the orientation is very, very low. That's why you find even people who graduate, even agriculturists, forest and what, the first thing they want to look for jobs is in town. not in the rural areas. So there is that kind of disorientation. Now, other countries that understood the dominance and nature of ideology in education, they support universities to meet that interest. And that's why you hear the Kennedy School of Government. What are they trying to do? It is to influence. When you hear MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, why did they come up with technology? To serve who? Because of the military in the 1880s. So our universities have to position themselves to look at what is the revolutionary trend taking place and what kind of research, what kind of engagement, what kind of involvement with the students and the faculty. Then the government can invest in you. Or the people who think, oh, well, this is a breakthrough here, let us invest. So I think that there is a disconnect between what we are learning, what we are doing, the national interest, the regional interest. For example, we are talking about East Africa. If you went into some universities, nobody is talking about EPOCOP, this pipe from to Tanga. And yet, it is something that is supposed to contribute to economic transformation. Nobody is talking about oil. Nobody. Now we had Kitezi. Okay? Yeah, everyone should be going to Kitezi to find out why didn't we harness the energy that was there. And many people don't know that actually it blew up because of the accumulation of gas. Now that's what the university should be doing. So I will be making a presentation on the 4th October to the Uganda Vice Chancellor's Forum. Yeah, and we want to interrogate those issues of are we really, how much are we relevant, and how much can we better position ourselves to be relevant. Then you see other countries like China, their universities are doing things that are growing China. If you go to South Korea, they were poorer than us. South Korea, Singapore, we were lending them money in the 60s up to the 70s. But what did they do that is unique is the universities were instructed, but also they had the learning capacity to know that the country is taking this direction. Outside that the competition is this, how can we increase our intelligence in the domains where actually we can have competitive advantage. If you listen, for example, in this country about the speeches of Museveni, yes, he has been consistent on certain issues. Yeah. Why haven't we learned to integrate those issues into our learning program? And then influence change at the communities. They came the National Agriculture Advisory Service, it collapsed. How could that happen when we have people who are doing extension work? How could it happen when we had the whole Minister of Agriculture? How can it happen when we have secretaries for agriculture everywhere? So where is the connection? Now the universities have not been key players. And once the universities and education institutions do not make their hands dirty, the communities think those things are not serious. So to give them weight, we must engage. And that's why with African Rural University, we are engaging very seriously with the youth. Okay. We have identified sectors which we must promote. One of them is agriculture. Another one is tourism. Another one is in the area of construction and all technical stuff. So then everyone starts saying, oh, this is very important for national building. And that's how actually we have got many young people transitioning, not just from graduating, but from working for themselves and also being engaged, being employed. And the structure of our intervention is that our graduates, we call them barefoot soldiers. Hey, they are barefoot soldiers there in the communities. They don't have even transport. They use boda boda. They use bicycles, they walk. Yes, and we are saying if you can have so many graduates doing that, dirtening their hands, soiling their hands, and actually it's not even soiling, because they are touching the real resourcefulness of what we have as a country. Then the locals start saying, even when you are educated, it's no longer a white job thing. You know, we used to have this blue collar and white collar, and with us we moved away from a white collar to blue collar, so that everyone works practically. Lastly, our education system, we have a challenge. If you go to some countries and you see what they teach in the nursery, and you see what we teach here in the nursery, they have nothing to do with continuity. In other countries, from nursery, they introduce them to real life. But here I think what we are doing, teach children, is how to clean their teeth only. Have you brushed? And we think we have done a good job. Yeah. They cannot prepare their tea, to learn how to prepare their tea. They don't know how to cook their breakfast. They don't know how to engage those things that are in real life. Okay? Now we come to teach people later in life. They call it, is it home economics? Yes. In senior, for senior. This one is already wasted. He is going to study that one as a subject, not as a practice. So therefore, socialization in skills and knowledge should be a continuum process. Now we are receiving people at university, trying to orient them in something like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Now we are talking about interdisciplinary learning, which means we have to have a combination of science, technology, engineering, humanities, what we call arts, and math. But it is strange for them, because they concentrated on just history, they hated the math, they hated the physics, and then you get them to come here to Aru. It's a tough thing. So then we spend a lot of time orienting them, because the modern world is where we are. Yesterday we were having a lot of trouble with students accessing LinkedIn, accessing platforms. Because they have for the first time getting a smartphone. They have been using stupid phones, and that shift is taking forever. Now, are we learning anything in university? Yes, there are some universities now that have identified themselves. For example, I think I want to acknowledge the VC of Victoria University has gone full blast on ICT for the university, so that everyone now is being brought up to speed. I think they have done that in Nkozi, they have done that in Guru. Then of course we are doing it here, especially with the traditional wisdom and the cultural methods of doing things. And that then prepares the students when they go to real life, they fit in. Lastly, because of our thought process of taking smaller numbers, doing practical and theory, and what we call appropriate learning, when our graduates finish, they don't look for jobs. The mother organization takes them in. So the majority of our graduates are serving the communities, and we are supporting them to do that. And that is the spirit now of Ubuntu, the spirit of self-help, the spirit of self-reliance, so that we educate the people coming out of university, not for their own survival, not for their own family, but to look at Uganda as a family. So therefore, when they go to work with the people, it's not a sacrifice. It's like laying a foundation for future generation. So we tell them, you are not sacrificing. There is opportunity cost, we know. But for posterity, we are building a system that will support your children and your grandchildren in a better way. Because we are independent how many years? 50? 60? Well, we are going into almost 60 years. Yes. So we are still talking about poverty. Where did we go wrong? We have universities, others churning out 10,000 students, 5,000 students. Where do they go? How can we explain that we still suffer a sense of powerlessness in Africa with this huge base of resources, both natural and human, and we are not tapping onto them? So that is a challenge for higher education, for the whole education system in the continuum, so that people do not despise work, people create work, and people create work for service. I think we have to up our game. We are talking about connectivity, fine. That is internet, we are talking about platforms. But the landscape is being invaded. I remember, was it 1998, I was in Boston. I visited a place where they were working with robots. And at that time it was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Then robotics became an issue in industry. What is our thinking about robotics? Now when we are still talking about robotics, talking about new forms of using ICT and whatever, now we are being bombarded by artificial intelligence. But robotics itself is based on artificial intelligence. Now we start looking at it as if it has come from heaven. No, we have been bombarded by artificial intelligence for a long time. But because we are not paying time and attention, we think when they tell us that now there is artificial intelligence. I remember when you were typing long ago, even before now, you made a mistake in the computer, it would be self-correction. Now that is intelligence. Yes. Was it natural? No. So now, how is RENU looking at those evolutions in technologies and having very serious conversations with their partners? Where are you in this stage? Where are you in this area? Where do you think you are good? Where do you think you are not good? And how can we partner to make things better? So as the world changes in terms of social organization, in terms of politics, in terms of climate, in terms of relationships. Now we are talking, for example, about the East African community. We are talking about Africa Union. We are talking about Vision 2031. We are talking about Vision 40 for Uganda. We are talking about Africa Agenda 2063. Those should be conversation, because the technologies that are needed to be part of the movement, to be part of the process, are going to be different from what we have today. So yes, RENU still has that opportunity in terms of research, but also working with partners to collaborate in research, to collaborate in formulating programs, also identifying among your partners, those who have which kind of comparative or competitive advantage in which domain, and then connect them so that there is that kind of strategic collaboration. So there is that can be done. No, a lot. Okay. Yeah, one is we are having technology in here, and we are talking about advanced technologies, and we have started working with a younger group of boys who have started what they call cyber school. And how can that idea of taking technology, especially ICT, down to the communities? We are talking about transformation in agriculture and sustainable agriculture. Is it about cultivation, or is it about the value chain? So how are we enabling the communities? You see, we have a radio station. Now we have started what we call streaming on YouTube. So we have also KKC television. Yeah. So, but how many can access it? So the next thing is, okay, you are there. Is it for the elites, or is it for the communities? So our next project, like we did with the radio, when we started the radio station here, very few people had cells. They didn't have even the radio sets. So we organized the listeners into what we call listeners clubs. We worked with Radio International, Radio Farm International, and we introduced radio sets, very cheap, easy to do, to manage. Because if you have a sender of information and you don't have a receiver, then that information is wasted. So now we are looking also at not only YouTube television, but we have also a studio for television. Fortunately, the president had given us equipment. The community members built the studio. It is all wired and all set. However, we could not be connected to the main, what they call local insertion, because I think the ministry is fearing to tell the president that we had a system in Hoima. It was vandalized, so we cannot be connected in Hoima. We had a system in Oruha, in Fort Potro. The equipment was stolen. So now we are here as victims of that kind of omission and commission. So we cannot be connected. Now the things we bought in 2017 or whatever, they are getting obsolete. Yeah. So we have to rethink. But the whole idea of visual learning, well and above audio, because radios are audio. And now we are looking at how can we make sure that in the next year, their television is working. Yes. And then television which is working can be accessed not on the usual television. No. Like now we access our radio, KKCR, because it is streamed. Yes. So we can also stream a television on even smartphone, because you watch YouTube on a smartphone. Yeah, so that's what now our projects are about. Then of course, we are in 20 districts, and we are saying we are going to train by the end of the year 70,000 youth. But how many youth do we have in the country? So many. So that is just a scratch on the surface of an iceberg. So we need to consolidate. We are accumulating evidence that the methodology works, so that then we can have a good conversation with not only a MasterCard Foundation for a repeat, but also for the government to take a cue that if it worked for URDT, how did they do it? What can we learn? Because the government actually is doing what we are doing, but in a more expensive way. That's why they have what they are calling, is it regional hubs? Yes. Yeah, regional hubs are very expensive. Yeah, it is not even sustainable. But we have community-based training at a certain level of learning. Then from there, they will graduate. That's why I was saying, you start with the basic networks, the basic platforms, then eventually you are going to have people who would like to design, to design, to produce. So we are negotiating with also the government. There is a facility here which we think we can use for innovation and incubation. Yeah, so that then we bring brains together. Because now what is happening, very few are actually innovating. The one who is doing a Gomez is the Gomez which was brought by the Indians. is this the government? And that is 1905. Many years ago. So we are saying, wait a minute. Even in fabric, let us change so that we have new fashions, new designs. I was telling the younger people who are doing tailoring. Then they start saying, you know, tailoring is very expensive. We say, why? Say, you know, these pieces of clothes, the yarns are very expensive. I said, no, you are not putting in brains. The people now don't want to just dress new dresses. No. I gave them an example. Have you seen the young people, how they are dressing? And coordinated colors. So go into Bikadi. You bring one type of shirt, another type of shirt, another one trousers, tear them a piece, and connect the pieces, and you have a fashion. So now, it's people to start being creative and innovative. Yeah, so that's where we are going now. We have been doing the ordinary. We are teaching people how to tailor. I remember we had to give people cement bags so that they can cut fashions. Now they are no longer cutting fashions with markers. The 3Ds and 3 whatever, it is on the computer. Correct? Yeah. So can we therefore go to that level? Otherwise, we are moving away from the statist model to a dynamic model.
Maybe this will add in the other upcoming project is the aspect of tourism.
Not only tourism, yeah, thanks for that. We are actually looking at 3 projects. Project 1 is in the area of economics. We have a training here we call care economy. In the care economy, we are looking at how do people exchange goods and services without monetary involvement. So we are starting what we call the community voucher system, so that they create their own currency. Not in competition with the government, but they can trade with each other. Like are you married? Okay, when you're going to get married, you'll be traded by your father asking for some goats and some cows in order to put value. The one of primary, less value, senior 4, some value, senior 6, university, different value, and more heads of cattle, whatever, depending on where you're coming from. So we look at that kind of structure in terms of how communities were actually exchanging goods and services, and we want to put their vouchers that can represent those values. Then eventually they can sell to each other, and at the end of it all, it is convertible into your currency. We call community voucher system, so that even when you don't have money, you don't sleep hungry, because you have another service you can offer, you have another good. Now, because we are in the monetary system, without money you are dead. And we are saying, that's not true. Africa was doing it differently. And that's what now we want to tap in. That's number 1. Number 2, as you will see when you are going out or when you are coming in, you look on your left, we have expanded what was originally a fish pond. Yeah, we are making it bigger. So we are doing what we call environmental development rather than environmental conservation and protection per se, to add value on the environment. And you'll find we are putting there a coffee shop. We have increased the pool for leisure, for fishing, etc., etc. I don't know whether you have met some friends here from the bush called the monkeys.
Yes, I've seen that.
Have you seen any campus with such kind of stuff?
The monkeys running around.
Yeah, with people. And not only monkeys, we have birds, we have corobash, the black and white, everywhere. So there is nature here, which we are promoting, and those are some of the projects that we think, one, they bring harmony among human spirit. Because for a long time, before we were advised wrongly, and that's why I like the Karamajong and the Maasai. The Maasai culture has remained until recently intact in terms of their relationship between wildlife and people. But what they did in the colonial days, because of their own interest and selfish interest of hunting, leisure, of skins and ivory, they separated human beings from nature. And now we look at each other as enemies. We kill them without compassion. When they eat your maize, that's the terrible. Here we had also a lot of arguments with people. Yeah, you know, they call them Musheshe's monkeys. I said, no, these monkeys, they are not mine. One, I found them here. Actually, we are the ones in the wrong place. Now, to live with them is not to harm them. So we create that natural balance. So that project of tourism goes beyond even animals. We are looking at production systems in the communities. What type of crops are we producing? I don't know whether you are aware that there are some people who eat pineapples from Europe. They don't know how a pineapple grows. There are people who take coffee. They don't know how coffee grows. Actually, some people, we took them to the pineapples and said, are you sure? We thought they grow on trees. Yeah, now that is tourism. So we have a lot of things that we can do here that we have not exploited. But the community has reached the level of sophistication now that when you have such things, they are not wild about them. I remember at the beginning, they used to burn our forest. Yeah, because they are chasing monkeys. And it was just fire because they are looking at them as vermin. Now we are saying no. And I'm glad UWA, the government policy now, the people around the national parks and animal reserves and whatever, they are sharing what they call the dividends of tourism. Yeah, so that's what we should also be doing with the people here so that they can see the benefits. But also where and above is to enable them to see that forests at times die because the agriculturists have died. If you don't have monkeys, you don't have chimpanzees, you don't have birds in the forest, which plant the forest, that forest dies. So, and it has something to do with the environment, it has something to do with nature. So it is not about money, the ecosystem and the benefits that come with it because of preservation, conservation, and development.